Welcome to You on the Law. I'm Steve Cilente.
And I'm Bob Lally.
Bob, today I'd like to do is respond to a viewer's question about traffic stops. And actually this is a very important topic because most people during their driving years never get stopped, or maybe once or twice. We're not talking about your driving record, we're talking about the average person.
All right.
But you can imagine a person's never been stopped, the lights come on the rear view mirror, there have got to be 1,000 questions that run through their mind. So one of the first questions I thought about is people may think of, well,
first of all, they're going to think, why are they stopping me? What should I do?
Exactly. Now, there's a lot of reasons why an officer may stop a person. And it's not necessarily because they've committed a violation. They may just be wanting to warn of a potential hazard up ahead on the road. You don't know when you see those lights.
No, usually the officer is going to have a reason for doing that. Possibilities you may have when you may not know it. You may not realize it. Is that right?
Exactly. And as you're aware, I come from a law enforcement background, and anybody who's been in law enforcement's got 1,000 stories of things that occur. But certainly there are many times when I made traffic stops, I know the officers do today, and it's not for a violation or not something that they're going to write a ticket to you for. But it could be for a traffic violation. But we also have what are known as equipment violations. You've got a tail light out, you don't have a proper license tab, maybe your license plate fell off. In one situation years ago, there was somebody that was driving a little bit funny, so I ran the license plate and it came back a stolen car.
Oh, that necessitated a stop.
Right in the middle of Main Street, guns drawn, and the person was extremely cooperative. We found out their car had been stolen, but they forgot to call in and say they found it.
That could be important.
No. I think they learned their lesson.
Yes, the equipment failure that you mentioned, that's actually kind of interesting because you might have a light out or a tail light that's not working that you might not know. I mean, we have indicators that tell us now, but not everything works.
Exactly. Well, certainly a lot of people see the red lights, and a lot of those red lights just say there's a problem somewhere. They're not clearly indicative of what the problem is. Now, one of the things I've seen in cars, for instance, you're driving and the dash lights go out. And you think, oh, stupid dash lights, I can drive without them. Many times that's the warning that your tail lights are out. That's your signal.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Some cars they have been made that way. But when those red lights are on, there's certain things that one has got to do.
Okay, and what do you have to do? Do you pull over?
Absolutely.
And you right away?
Which way do you go?
Well, if you're going down the street and you're to the right, I assume, and as soon as you arrive at a safe place.
Exactly. Now, a lot of people think because there's, for instance, a two-lane roadway with a center turn lane, well, I'm going to make a turn to the left anyway, so I'll just pull over to the left. Officers are instructed to pass on the left because everybody's supposed to be going to the right. So you follow the law, you go to the right, make sure it's a nice, safe place to go. If there's a wide spot, pull over. If there's no place, like a lot of these country roads don't have a place to stop,
Mm-hmm.
Just pull over and stop.
Well,
The officer will go around when it's safe.
I was pulled over one time up here for going too slow, but when they pulled me over, I was driving along, and there was just a long, I mean, about a mile or so stretch of road where you couldn't pull over. So I waited until it went into 2 lanes, and then was able to find a place.
When you see those red lights, pull over to the right.
That's why they were upset then.
That's
Okay.
exactly why they were upset.
All right.
Because a lot of people do funny things. First of all, many people do not see you because you're instructed when you first learn to drive to look in your mirrors. If you've got side mirrors, you look at those. If you've got a rear view mirror, which you're supposed to have, you look there. But people have a very bad habit of not using their mirrors to see what's around them. And certainly, as you're aware, when you drive, you should be driving with the knowledge of whatever is around you. So I've been behind many people. Red lights on, they don't see you, they just keep on driving. In today's world, they crank up the stereos, but they don't hear anything other than their stereo either.
They're in their own environment.
Sirens, not heard, and they just keep driving. And you may be putting someone at risk if you're driving that way, because the officer may be going to a very bad traffic accident or some situation that's an emergency that they have to get to quickly. So drive knowing what's around you.
I got a question about that because up here, particularly on roads in the country, I see people, and when I see red light, I really try to pull over immediately. But I see red lights going on, sirens, and I see people, they keep on driving on the other side of the road. What's going on there?
Well, I think technically under the law, if you see red lights coming toward you in the opposite lane of travel, yes, you should pull to the right. But now you're on a 4-lane roadway. Why do you need to pull to the right? There's plenty of room. Pull to the right anyway. Even if there's 40 feet between you and the officer, just get off the road because you don't know what could happen. You don't know if the officer needs to make a turn right where you are. So pull off to the road. Don't block a driveway. Don't create a hazard, certainly. Just pull to the right. Now, many people they pull to the right, but they slow way down. The law says stop. But I don't think most officers are going to care as long as you're off the road when they're going the opposite direction and they have plenty of room. If they're behind you, on the other hand, be prepared to stop immediately because they may be stopping you. Now, there's some situations that when you're looking at rearview mirror, you realize you're being pulled over and 2 officers get out of the car. Any idea why?
I'm going to hazard a guess here and say it's probably for the protection of the officers, am I right? They have some suspicion.
Exactly. Now, it could be actually a citizen that's riding along, but most often when it's another officer, it's not unusual to have 2 officers in a car because there are situations where 2 officers' presence is required. On traffic stops, certainly if an officer who's driving makes a traffic stop and they've got an officer with them, that officer's going to get out and be there for safety reasons, not necessarily because they think you're a criminal. But I think
They
everybody...
don't know what they're getting into, do they? They have absolutely no idea what their matter of business is going to entail in that moment.
Just watch the news. I mean, it could be nothing more than some elder person that they're stopping, and they don't know that initially. It could be somebody that's a wanted felon that's armed. It could be somebody that's not wanted for anything, but they just committed a crime that nobody knows about, and they come out armed. An officer has absolutely no idea when they turn on that red light, in most cases, what's going to happen.
Move slowly.
The officer certainly moves slowly. They're watching
No, I'm thinking
for their own self-protection.
Yeah.
But
well, what should you do when this is occurring and say you got 2 officers approaching your vehicle? I mean, I'm going to look up and I'm going to have a little concern. Oh boy, what's going on here? I'm in trouble now.
okay. Well, you know, and you learn in your driver's education, the officer has an absolute right, and you must produce your driver's license, your registration, and some proof of insurance.
That's required, and proof of insurance is required in California too.
Right. So you see those lights on. What you shouldn't do is make a lunge for your glove compartment where they're at. And you can imagine if you did that, what might be going through the officer's mind?
What he's going to grab in that glove box, or what that person is, what he or she is going to grab in that block. I'd be really concerned if I was an officer.
Or reach quickly to the floor.
The other thing is, if I was an officer, is what is that person hiding if they're going to the floor?
The officers are trained to anticipate virtually anything. They understand that while you're reaching for that glove compartment very quickly or reaching to the floor very quickly, it may be a wholly innocent act. But should they depend on it being a wholly innocent act and not anticipate that it could be a precursor to a violent act?
True, it could be setting down a soda cup or something.
Or anything. So if you get stopped, best thing is if your glove compartment is where the registration is, you stop. When the officer comes up, you've got your hands on your steering wheel.
Do you move them or do you?
If you got them there to begin with, just leave them there.
Just wait for them to come.
Right. Because you're showing the officer that, there's nothing wrong here.
I have a question for you. Say your hands are on the wheel and you have electric windows like most of us have on vehicles today, and your windows rolled up. Do you wait till the officer gets up there, or do you roll it down before you move your hand down?
Not having ever been on the receiving end, I would, except for as an officer, I would say, as the officer rolls or walks up, roll the window down, sufficient to talk. Again, avoid the quick movements. Put your hand back on the steering wheel, and the officer's going to tell you why he stopped you. Certainly, we'll talk about how not to start that conversation.
Yeah, that's what I won't steal your
We'll get
thunder.
there.
Okay, all right.
If it's dark, turn on the interior light so the officer can see what's going on. I know that my truck has got dark windows. Legal in California, the way that they're darkened, but from the rear, in daylight, you have a hard time seeing, much less at night.
Now, when you say turn on the light so they see what's going on, you mean in the whole car?
Dome light,
Okay.
all right? Sometimes it's very handy. Again, if you've got to make a movement that could be suspicious, just wait.
Okay.
Now, oftentimes you'll see the officers put spotlight on their car to shine on the interior of your car. They want to see what's going on. It's not done to intimidate you. It's done for their safety. And again, having been in law enforcement, there are times that had it not been for that spotlight being on the interior of the car, either myself or my passenger officer could have been at risk because of what we could now see going on the inside of the car. But for the average citizen, it's not there to intimidate you. It's there for officer safety. Now, we talked about the insurance, registration, so forth. Remember the old days, you used to have to put the registration where it's visible from the outside of the car. We don't suggest that you do that now.
No, that's going to lead to identity theft, I would think.
Well, it could cause other problems.
Oh, okay.
Particularly with certain sexes. If they've got their name, their address there, not particularly a good idea, but put them in a place that you can get them very readily. I put mine on my visors held by a clip that's got my registration and insurance because, for instance, I let my office staff drive my vehicle. They need to know where it is because they could get stopped.
I think everybody should really listen to what you just said, because so many of us will take our papers and just shove them in the glove box, and we don't put the new ones in, and we don't know what's in there,
And for certain people that are engaged in certain types of activity that put other things in their glove compartment, as soon as they open that glove compartment, that officer's going to be watching, and if there's illegal drugs, alcohol, anything else that's illegal in there, that officer has an absolute right to look from the outside of that car into that glove compartment, and as soon as they see that illegal drugs or whatever it is, you just open the door for a complete search of your car, and you're probably going to go to jail.
Right, because now you have when the officer looks in and sees that, he's seeing that in plain view, is what we call plain view. You've opened it up, and now he has a reasonable belief, or what we call reasonable suspicion, probable cause to go, because there's reasonable suspicion that there's other things in the vehicle.
Right. And I put mine on my visor, not because I don't want them to see in the glove compartment, because that way I know exactly where they are, and I don't have to go digging through my glove compartment, or in my case, I've also got a center console that's got all kinds of stuff in it that nothing to hide. It's just that I want them easy to find.
It's true. In times of stress,
Right.
you want to easily know where to go. Yeah.
Exactly. But once the officer comes up, be calm, be polite, and don't interfere with the officer. Now, the worst thing not the worst thing, but one of the things you absolutely don't do, the red lights come on, you pull over, and you fly out of the car back toward that officer.
I'm thinking that's not a good idea at all.
It's not, because the officer, again, has no idea what to anticipate. They've got to take a defensive role, whether it's they take out a firearm, their nightstick, because they don't know what's going on. And it may be nothing more than you're angry. Bad timing to be angry.
I'm thinking in this day and age, the first thing's going to happen is a gun's going to be drawn on you.
Very well could be. I know an incident that in the middle of the night, another officer and I were stopped at an intersection, and a car went by heading out of the city limits at a very high rate of speed and through a stop sign. And I was facing the wrong way. The other officer never even saw it. And I knew that by the time we got her turned around, there was absolutely no way we were going to catch up with this person. So I ignored it. About 10 minutes later, here came the same car the opposite direction, running the stoplight again, or stop sign. So I pulled in behind it, turned on the red lights. The brakes were immediately slammed on. The person whipped to the side of the road, and before that car stopped, the car door was open, and he was coming out.
There's a lot of erratic behavior going on here.
Exactly. So by the time I had to unhook my seatbelt, I'm a firm believer in seatbelts, threw the door open just as they got to the door. That was timed on my part, and it hit them in the chest, and they went down, and of course I was immediately there telling them, don't move. And the person had lost their breath thanks to the door. And as he caught his breath, he said, I need to get to the hospital. I've got a person in my car with a crushed chest. I said, well, make that 2. I didn't tell him that, but that's true story. And I felt bad for the guy because I had intentionally used my door as a defensive mechanism, and he was trying to get someone to the hospital, violating laws, what he was doing, and that person was in bad shape, but they weren't going to die. He was putting everybody else on the highway at risk. I made him follow me to the hospital. I had my red lights on, but I wasn't breaking laws that were going to put anybody in danger. What if en route to the hospital, he would have hurt somebody else? That's part of what officers do. When they stop you for speeding, they don't know what's going on, and you may think it's an emergency, but we previously on another show, we talked about negligence. You could be civilly liable, even though you say, I'm trying to get so-and-so to the hospital because they're injured. Don't do that. If you got somebody injured, call 911. Don't you try to play ambulance, and certainly do not come flying out of a car at an officer.
I think that's a classic situation where somebody gets so excited or out of control that they're not in reality with the situation.
It happens.
Yeah.
I think that everybody has been under the influence of adrenaline before, and they do things that they're not thinking very clearly.
So stay calm as best you can.
Right.
Okay.
And don't tell the officer a lie. My name's John Doe. Later they find your driver's license and you're not John Doe. Don't give them false documents. These are very quick ways to land in jail.
I was just going to say, is that criminal now in California? I don't know if it always has
Absolutely.
been. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Providing false information to an officer?
Possessing false, like a false driver's license, that's a crime.
That is, yeah.
You tell an officer that your name is John Doe and it's not John Doe, you're obstructing an officer in the performance of their duty. Yes, it's a crime.
That's kind of interesting. It's not the providing of false information, it's the obstruction of the officer.
Well, no, it can be both.
Okay.
It can be both. Depends on the facts.
All right.
But watch your words. Starting off by telling the officer that he has questionable heritage and impugning his mother's integrity is not a good way to start off the conversation. Watch your body language, your movements, your emotions, because
Anything you say can be used against you, right?
certainly I think every officer's been in a situation where they've stopped somebody for a minor thing. They're telling somebody that they've got a tail light out. Their license plate is about ready to fall off. And they come flying out of their car saying, "What are you stopping me for? I'm a taxpayer," on and on and on. And all you want to do is say, "You need to get your taillight fixed."
Aren't we talking about something here called the attitude test here at this point?
Oh, there's no such thing as an attitude test for law enforcement officers?
No?
Never. Oh, no.
No? Okay.
Absolutely not.
All right.
Individuals, maybe. Certainly. I mean, officers are human. Certainly, if you come out of the car, you've got your dander up, you're screaming and you're hollering, it takes a lot of experience for an officer not to react to that. And your officers that are more seasoned most likely are not going to react. They'll let you go on rant and rave for a long period of time before you finally calm down enough where they tell you what's going on. But it's not a good idea to jump out of your car, particularly if what you've done, you know you're absolutely wrong. You're doing 85 miles an hour in a 35 zone. All right? Not a good time to be jumping out and yelling and screaming.
I just thought of a good analogy that may apply here of how you should act. I'd treat that officer as you would the judge if you were in court.
Have you seen how some people try to treat judges?
I knew you might say that. Okay.
It doesn't work very well
Yeah.
because judges can say, "Remand this person. They're
That's
going
true.
to jail."
Yeah.
The other thing, don't argue with the officers. It's important not to do that. And it's more than just not trying to upset the officer.
Well, you're going to say something at that point. I mean, you're going to get angry and you're going to say something that definitely is going to be used against you in court at that point.
One of the things that officers have done, I certainly have done it, stop you for speeding and say, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And if you say, "All right, I knew I was doing 65 miles an hour," I'm going to write that little note on the back of my citation to acknowledge that they were going over the speed limit, all right? Anything you say can be used against you. Whether you mean it as an innocent remark or not, it can be, depends on the situation.
There's no real good jokes. It's an argument that one of those arguments you're not going to win. So,
Not likely. Certainly don't run. Don't touch the officer.
when you say don't run, you mean outside of the vehicle, or what do you?
I've had people, like I said, don't run. I've had people walk away. I don't have to put up with this, and they just start walking. You know, they leave their car, they just walk away. You're interfering with the officer in the performance of their duty. Your car's probably going to get towed, and that's about a $300 tow bill, I think, today. Anything you do that obstructs or delays the officer in the performance of their duty could land you in jail.
Could
Not
that be
a good
charged
idea.
as a felony?
In certain situations, but not in anything I've described. It's
Okay.
pretty rare.
Curious about that.
Certainly do not resist. If the officer says, "I need you to step back here," and actually reaches for you because you're obstructing traffic, don't pull away and don't push the officer because you're probably going to end up face down on the ground. Anything that is aggressive behavior, physical behavior toward the officer could result
Is going
in
to
your
be
arrest.
interpreted as physical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Don't complain to the officer on the scene. Don't make any statements regarding the incident. Because, again, you don't want to argue. And as a defense attorney,
Well, the first thing you should do, if you find yourself in the situation that the facts are leading to what you're kind of leading into now, that's when I want to exercise my right to be silent. I want an attorney. And
Well-
you have a right to have an attorney.
no, you don't.
Well, not at this point. You're not arrested yet.
Right.
That's what
And
you're
a-
getting to.
a
Yeah,
lot of-
okay. All right.
Now, understand, of course, in most situations, the officer may write a ticket, may not. And especially, you don't want to come flying out of a car, yelling all kinds of things at the officer, only to find out that they weren't going to write a ticket in the first place, but
Right.
you just earned one.
You talked them into it.
That's right. You're only detained. You're not arrested.
And there is a big difference there.
And they don't have to advise you of your rights when you're detained, correct?
That's right.
In most instances.
That's right. You're free to leave.
Right. Except that I would not do that.
That's that's not a good idea.
Until the officer says, "You can go now," not a good idea to say, either arrest me or I'm leaving, and then turn to walk away.
It's what I would call a legal fiction, so to speak.
Yes. it's not a good idea, and I've certainly have told people that at that point you had a right to just tell the officer, arrest me or I'm going to walk away. But those are fact-based responses, not a typical traffic stop, just not a good idea. Remember, if one of the things that people would do oftentimes when we stopped them is tell you how wrong you were, and they're going to take you to court. And what happens, you think, when people tell the officer, I'll see you in court?
Well, if I was the officer, I would start documenting everything so that I would have a real good memory. And not only that, that officer's brain is going to kick in so that he's going to remember more detail. He's going to remember you.
You're exactly right. The officers write on the back of their citation what occurred. They acknowledge that they were speeding. They did this or did that. The nastier you are, the more that they write. And I know from my experience, both as an attorney and from law enforcement officers' perspective, there are times when officers were going to court and they didn't write any notes. Why? Because the person was cooperative. They'd said nothing that stood out in the officer's mind. They didn't write any notes, or they wrote cursory notes, and the officer had a hard time testifying, and the person got off.
It was just an ordinary day.
Right. Let's talk about rights. We touched on it very briefly in talking about when you're stopped. It's not an arrest, not a detention. Most often, you have to be under arrest or a situation that could be deemed you're arrested before
You're
rights
free
come
not
in.
to leave.
Right.
You have to know kind of the circumstances are you're free not to leave, and then they have to advise you what we all know as our Miranda rights: the right to remain silent, right to not incriminate yourself, right to an attorney, and so forth.
Right. But on a traffic stop, the officer doesn't have to tell you anything.
No.
But what people don't understand is when you volunteer information, the officer's not asking any questions, but you start volunteering information, that's completely admissible in court because they're not asking you anything. It's the questions from the officer that require the Miranda rights, not just automatic responses that the person says, correct?
Correct, and I got to admit, and sometimes I'll watch these traffic shows with the traffic stops, and the people will just go on, and it'll just all become admissible.
Exactly. And we call their spontaneous declarations, which is kind of what we're talking about, where a person gets out of the car and says, I know I was speeding, but I wasn't going all that fast. Very admissible in court. So, when it comes down to it, what the officer stopped a person, and what can we tell a person is the best thing to do? Okay, why are they there?
For the safety.
The officers are there for our safety.
For safety and the responsibility.
Well, our responsibility. Anytime you're driving a vehicle, there is a lot of responsibility to go with that. All right?
All right. I have a question when we're